I can, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just hopefully sharing my screen. Right, hopefully you can see that. Can you confirm? Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, okay. The application site here before us is 73 Newmarket Road in Cambridge. The proposal seeks full planning consent for mixed-use development comprising ground floor commercial unit, which is Class E, with 9 residential units on the upper floors, along with associated infrastructure following demolition of the existing building. The application has been reported to Planning Committee as there have been third-party representations contrary to the officer recommendation. So site location plan here, the application site lies on the northern side of Newmarket Road, highlighted in red. It's occupied by a 2-storey building which is currently vacant and was previously used as an Indian restaurant since 2014. Prior to that, it was the former Bird in Hand public house. The building lies adjacent to Newmarket Road with an area of hard standing to the rear. To the west of the site lies the Whale Wall art mural, which forms part of the Kingsley Walk development, which is set off the boundary. So it's just along there. The site is surrounded on 2 sides by 4- and 5-storey modern apartment blocks on the north and western side, and then a 3-storey office block here, which is 77 to 81 Newmarket Road on the eastern side, which leads up to a 1-storey tyre business and then the Newmarket Road roundabout. So we've got the sites highlighted in red here, Newmarket Road here and Kingsley Place here. The site lies within the Riverside and Stourbridge Common Conservation Area. There is a plane tree here which is subject to TPO, which lies outside of the site but it's close to the boundary of the site. There are no listed buildings or other heritage assets within close proximity of the application site. It's important to note that there is an extant planning permission on the site for proposed mixed-use development comprising part demolition of the existing building with retention of the front and the side elevations, and erection of 7 studio units and 2 2-bed units and the commercial restaurant public house with flexible use associated with that. This was approved by members at Planning Committee in December 2002. This is extant consent currently. So the proposed ground floor plan would comprise of commercial unit Class E. It would comprise of 4 visitor cycle parking spaces at the front. There would be a secure lockable passageway which leads to the back of the site, in which there'll be 10 residential cycle stores and then 6 commercial cycle stores to the side and the rear, along with the refuge storage area. And then you'd have access to the residential here and then the commercial at the front. At the back of the site, there would be a planted area with grass and a paved area and various trees, and then there would be to the side of the commercial unit a paved area for use by the commercial unit. Just to note that no car parking is proposed for this site. So the first and second floor plan as shown here would comprise of 8 1-bedroom units, apartments. The proposed third floor and roof plan would comprise of a 1-2-bed unit with private roof terrace, and then it'd comprise of cedar and green roofs adjacent to that unit and then on the actual roof itself. So just as we go through, this shows the proposed and existing front south elevation. Got the existing building here forming 73 and then the proposed building. The existing building is 2-storey and measures approximately 9 metres in height. The proposed building would be 4 stories and measure 12.8 metres in height. So we've got existing and proposed rear north elevation here, so existing building and then the proposed building. Got the side east elevation here. You can see the existing building 73 here. This is the commercial unit which lies to the east, and then this is the proposed building here. The other side, the existing building here, this is the mural mural art. This is the proposed. And then we just go on to some street scene views here. The existing building proposed in relation to the adjacent apartment block at Brook House and the commercial unit here. And then in the back, you can slightly see Newton Court. We've got the existing and proposed rear street scene views here. So it's the rear of the proposed building, rear of the existing. And then the east elevation here with the existing building and then the proposed in relation to the street scene. You've got Newmarket Road here. And finally, the west elevation, Newmarket Road here, got the existing with the mural and then the proposed, and then to the rear, Newton Court. Just got some street scene photographs here. The existing building is here. You've got Newmarket Road and then Kingsley Walk here. The existing building here with Brook House next door. Now that's photograph just looking opposite the site, the existing building here and the adjacent buildings, Newmarket Road. Got a CGI here of looking opposite the site of the proposed building. And another street scene visualization of the building here, looking down Newmarket Road towards the roundabout. And an aerial visualization here of the site and the building here, Newmarket Road there. So main considerations of the proposal. The proposal for 9 residential units and Class E commercial unit in principle is acceptable and would accord with policy 3 of the local plan. We're also mindful of the extant permission for 9 apartments and commercial units. In terms of heritage, the Conservation Officer has raised an objection to the proposal on the grounds of the loss of the building, which they consider would fail to preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area due to the loss of a positively contributing building and the proposed replacement building lacking architectural characteristics and historical associations within the conservation area. As a result, they consider that this would be harmful to the conservation area and the proposal would not preserve or enhance the conservation area. They consider the proposal to result in moderate, less than substantial harm. When considering the immediate context of the site and its area, which is of modern buildings at large height, scale and mass, together with the existing building, which has limited detailing and is an arts and craft form, the loss of the building for a high quality replacement is not considered by officers to be an in principle issue. Harm would arise from the loss of the building in the conservation area, but this needs to be and can be balanced against the merits of the replacement building and the public benefits. Officers consider that the harm caused by the loss of the existing building and its associated significance can be mitigated, And this is due to the immediate context of the site, the high quality replacement, the unique design and the public benefits which would arise. In terms of design, the urban design officers support the proposal as the building would create a contextually appropriate building through careful consideration of scale, massing, urban grain and the interface with the street scene and frontage. Neighbour amenity, the scheme is considered acceptable in terms of impact to neighbours, which has been demonstrated in the application. Trees and landscaping, the proposal would result in the provision of hard and soft landscaping, which is supported by the landscape and tree officer and were considered to enhance significantly the site that's already there. Biodiversity, the proposal would increase on-site biodiversity net gain through seed and roofs, small area of grassland and trees to the rear and back boxes. This is a on balance recommendation of approval. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, I'm here. Yep. It's not, I'm echoing, is that all right? Sorry. It's not very long. It's, you know, won't be more than a minute, I'm sure. Good morning, councillors. I'm the Principal Planning Officer for Cambridge Past, Present and Future. We are Cambridge's largest civic society, and one of our aims is to protect, celebrate and improve the important built heritage of Cambridge. The officer's report in front of you states that the weight placed on the heritage value of the site is finely balanced. CPPF wished to speak up in favour of greater weight being placed on the historic significance of the building and that permission should be refused. The Riverside and Stourbridge Common Conservation Area appraisal describes the area of Newmarket Road from Parsonage Street to Elizabeth Way. It describes the attractive terrace of two-storey houses, the Burley Arms Public House, the decorative three-storey Burley House, the substantial villas leading up to the modern buildings adjoining this site. It describes these latter buildings as of little visual interest, unrelated to each other and creating an uninspiring street scene. 73 Newmarket Road is a small island of history within the sea of bland redevelopment in an otherwise historically important street. It needs to be preserved and not replaced. We support the views of the Conservation Officer, who raises the importance of the building reflecting the historical use of the site as a public house. He also describes the visually positive relationship the building has to the street due to its human domestic scale and attractive architectural detailing. The replacement building does not replicate this detailing and human scale. The fact that the building is surrounded by modern development is not a reason to continue this approach, but makes it more important to preserve this building. We consider that the application does not meet the requirements of policies relating to development in a conservation area and should be refused. Thank you.
Yes, given the sustainable location of the site, no parking is proposed at all, which considered acceptable. In terms of cargo bike provision, there isn't space for cargo bike provision there because of that would eat into the commercial unit and the building there. Yeah, again, there isn't any provision for disabled parking. Size of the commercial unit, don't think I could comment on that, just because we have to consider what's put forward and consider that in its own right. In terms of neighbour amenity, in regards to Brook House, the proposal is 19 metres from Brook House, so it's considered a significant distance with the road in between. The building has been designed in regards to privacy to have fins and vertical louvres to stop kind of direct overlooking to the neighbouring properties, and given the distance, consider that there would be no loss of light to Brook House. To the property at the back at Newton Court, the building is sited roughly about 7 metres away from that property. The application is accompanied by a light assessment in which consideration has been taken in regard to light to those existing rooms and balconies, and the assessment came back that it would provide sufficient lighting and adequate amenity to those properties at Newton Court. I think that hopefully that covers everything that you raised there.
Thanks, Katie. I don't know if we needed to have you show us on a plan with your laser pointer the access for cargo bikes, perhaps. I don't know if that was something that might be useful. Read that question. Okay.
So just wait for the presentation to come up again. So hopefully you can see that. I have asked this question in terms of the cargo bike provision, and there is kind of limited space there. You've got the visitor space there, and then the commercial, and then the residential. Just access there into the back. Sorry, I haven't got my laser pointer on there.
Okay, thanks. I presume that's okay with you then, Councillor Gawthrope-Wood. So there's space for cargo bikes, is it, Katie? It's not just space for ordinary bikes.
No, there isn't. There isn't space for cargo bikes. Sorry.
Okay. A few questions lining up now, then, Katie. So I'll go back to councillors and then go back to you. Okay. So the first one was Councillor Pora.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I was sitting at the previous application, which, as Toby rightly said, I think was 2020 rather than 2002. I think for me, I find this a difficult application because, in effect, the public so we've identified harm in a conservation area, so we have to therefore identify public benefit, as we know. We've debated many times. But at the moment, the officer's recommendation is relying on the public benefit of 9 houses, but the extant permission already gives that. So for me, I feel we should be judging it on what was agreed 2 years ago versus what there is now. And that for me means that the Conservation Officer's concerns weigh quite heavily because obviously, in effect, what this is doing is removing the arts and craft frontage. And I, for me, on balance, find that not to be acceptable because, in effect, the public benefit has already been established. There will already be 9 flats there, possibly not quite as nice as these ones, I accept that. But equally, if I looked back on the file, the previous application was only supported because it retained that frontage. I accept it's no longer pub use. I mean, that isn't an issue. It's already been granted. But for me, we're kind of looking at the wrong thing. The public benefit's already there. So what we're looking at is what does removing the frontage add to what was already granted 2 years ago? And to me, it detracts. I mean, obviously, it's in my ward, so I know the area, but I think most people will know it from going over Elizabeth Way. It's not the most attractive part of Cambridge. There's a tyre garage, there's some big, massive buildings. But one thing you do get is as you come up Maid's Causeway and Newmarket Road, this kind of steps it down a little bit. And actually, irrespective of the removal of the frontage, for me, personally, I find the building proposed to be very large and very pointy. That's not an architectural term, I appreciate, but when you come up, it's really quite imposing. So actually, I think it would be really helpful for us to see what was consented, because my recollection was that because that lower frontage was retained, the massing was much further set towards the back. So I don't object to the principle of development. I think, if I remember right, I voted for it last time. But I do object at the moment to the fact that we seem to be weighing up a public benefit that's already there against removing one of the few architecturally significant parts. I also would just like to query, as we always do, the width of the passageway to the bikes at the back, please, just to make sure that is 1.2 metres, because obviously even if it can't fit cargo bikes, then we want to make sure it can fit normal bikes. I hope that makes sense, Chair. I probably didn't describe that in the best architectural terms.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so we'll go around getting questions on that. And just to say, Katie, if you could pick up on Councillor Hora's point there about how to consider this item, I think that'd be useful. There's a lot of rhetorical comment as well, but questions, particularly if you could pick up on especially that point that Councillor Hora just made there. Councillor Dryden, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit confusing sometimes at planning meeting now. We seem to be going around redesigning something. It comes to us. I thought you get your agenda, you decide on what you see before you. And I've been looking at this, and I think the officers got it right. The only objections, all the rest on pages 39, 40, 41, 42, other than one, is all no objections. So they've got no objections here. And I can agree with some of the things said, but that's not what's in front of us. We've got to make a decision on what we see here, not redesign and put things in. I mean, cargo bikes, that should be asked for perhaps before it comes here, but is it in our local plan that all new buildings have cargo bikes spaces? I'm not sure. So I say everything else I see, everything else I read through this, it meets the to be granted. So I'd find it very hard to vote against this. So I think I'll have to go along with the officer's recommendation to approve it.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, Councillor Thornborough.
Thank you to the case officer presenting. So I've got a few questions that could you confirm whether this is a building of local interest or not? Can you also confirm whether demolition and the amount of the carbon emissions is something that we can consider? We know it's important, the circular economy and reuse of existing buildings is important, but is it a policy that we can, within our policies, is that something we can refer to? I've got some concerns. I've got concerns about the construction traffic management. I know this is normally a condition, but it is a tight site, and we've had some real problems in Cambridge with construction traffic management. I've also got concerns about disabled visitors and deliveries, which I do think is covered under M42. I think there should be a provision for disabled visitors. And again, they've chosen not to put cars, not to provide cars, which I do support, but I feel that in turn needs the focus on the provision of bicycle parking is more important. And I note that these are all twin rooms, so there are 20 residents here, and with no parking, I feel that they really should be a consideration about parking bike parks for 20 cycles. And also, I note that the cycles are towards the rear of the building rather than at the front, which is we do have a policy about bike parking. So I wondered if the officer could comment on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Collis.
Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of things. I think Councillor Thornborough sort of touched on one of them, but the point that one of our speakers made about traffic and road safety during construction, I think we need properly addressed. I haven't really heard a satisfactory answer to that. Secondly, the Conservation Officer's objection. I'd just like to understand, sort of along the lines of what Councillor Porra said, why, that seems a pretty significant objection to me, and I understand the grounds on which that objection is made. I'd like to understand a bit more about why that isn't considered significant enough consideration for us to reject the application, because it seems pretty serious to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair. There's no doubt in my mind that this new building fits comfortably with the existing environment, but I don't think that really is the issue. The concerns of the Conservation Officer, I believe, have a considerable weight here. I have concerns. I'm reminded of the Flying Pig, where you've got a building that's completely going to be surrounded by modern buildings, and so therefore it proves to be insignificant. But it isn't insignificant. It's a sign of the past. This is a conservation area. This is a reminder of what used to be there, or is still there in actual fact. And were we to just rub this away, it would be another area that is completely modernised. And I'm really imbalanced in my mind as to whether the progress shown by getting some accommodation and a modernised building is actually more important than something that is a sign of the past. So I'm really imbalanced. I really am interested in what my colleagues here are saying. And one question, disabled parking. Did I hear that there was no disabled parking? Yeah, I think that is a consideration. There's a number of flats. It's going to be a commercial property on the ground floor. Is there no concern for disability here? That will do me for the moment.
Councillor, I'll just add one question to that before I get back to you, Katie. So there was some comment about the embedded carbon from the ward councillor, embedded carbon, which is a fair comment. And I just wondered if you were able to talk about that and about any consideration of carbon and sustainability vis-a-vis the weighing up of using an existing building and building a new building. So back to you then, Katie.
Thanks, Chair. There's a lot of questions there, so hopefully I can cover that all. In terms of the width of the cycleway between the building, the front and the rear, the width of that is 1.6 metres. The building's not a building of local interest. It just is, in terms of heritage asset, it's just within the conservation area. In terms of consideration, the assessment of it, we need to consider the impact, the loss of the building and the proposed new building in regards to the heritage impact, and obviously mindful of the fact that the extant permission is there. Cycle parking. So we've got, in terms of the cycle parking, if I share my screen again, we've got cycle parking for the commercial to the front, and then to the back is to the front is for commercial, for visitors to the commercial space, and then to the back is for the residential and then also commercial staff. And the car parking provision for biking is considered sufficient. In terms of the traffic management and highways, county highways have not raised any objections, and they have conditioned a traffic management plan to deal with the construction process and how they deal with highways in regards to that. And they consider that acceptable in regards to highway safety and construction process. In terms of parking, so there's no parking on site at all. There isn't any provision for disabled parking, given space and constraints on the site. In terms of the conservation's objections, the conservation's concerns and objections have been considered. It's very much a balancing act in terms of what they're concerns with, and then also the impact of the proposal. So we have considered their objections. And then embedded carbon. So the proposal was for the complete rebuild of the building. The previous application did retain the front and the side of the building. In this instance, it's all being demolished, which we obviously have to consider that on its own merits. And the fact in terms of the embedded carbon, they are looking to remove that, the whole of the building, which we have haven't raised concerns about. I don't know if that addresses the concerns at all, the comments.
Anything I missed out, councillors? Yes, Councillor Bora. Hang on. Right. Is this something that's missed out or a new question?
Yes, I think we asked if we could see what the previous scheme looked like.
Oh, yes.
I think that was the chair asked as well, just to see the massing and what was there in terms of height in the original building.
So this is the front of the original scheme, and then this is the side looking towards where the mural is along Kingsley Place. Retention of the side and the front of the existing building, and then it was building out to the back, and then this is the rear of that.
Katie, is that okay, Katie? Yep. Sorry, Councillor Bora, apologise.
I will come back but I'm happy to wait for other questions first.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the answers. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go back to the conservation objections. I'm hearing you saying that they've been considered, but I'm not getting an answer to my question, which is about the weight given to them and how they've been considered, and why they're not given the weight that they appear to deserve. Thank you.
Can you address that straight away, please, Katie, if possible?
Yeah. So intake obviously considered the harm that has arisen, or the officer considers as arising from the existing and proposed. We have considered the comments and given it significant weight. However, given the fact that the existing building and where it is sited within Newmarket Road, and the fact that just going to get my notes up, it's got limited detailing. It is arts and crafts form. However, it's a kind of redevelopment of the 19th century, rather than dating earlier than that. The loss of the building is, and then the replacement, which is considered to be high quality, is considered to be acceptable in regards to the conservation area. And we feel that officer considered that the loss of that building in the conservation area can be mitigated by the fact it's high quality replacement buildings, it's unique, and the public benefits that arise. Hopefully that addresses your question.
Councillor Collis?
Go round in circles about this. I'm not sure it does. No, sorry.
Toby to add to that if possible. Toby?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I think what's interesting here is that you've got a conservation officer who's obviously raised a significant objection with regard to the loss of the building, and the officer report recognises that there will be harm arising from that demolition. So what members need to kind of balance up is, you know, what significance do you want to give to that harm against the public benefits arising from the proposal? And you can look at the economic benefits, you can look at the quality of the accommodation that's being provided, which has been cited by the applicants better, the stamped scheme, and also the limited amount of new housing that would come with the proposal. It's a fine balance. The officers said it's a finely balanced decision that we have come to as officers. Members would be within their rights to take a different view on the significance of the existing building. That extant consent is a material consideration because it could be implemented, which perhaps from what Councillor Porrer was alluding to might lessen the housing provision argument that's been put forward as benefit arising from this proposal. But it's for members to kind of weigh these matters up. We've weighed them up. We think it's, you know, it's very finely balanced, but actually the scheme is a really well thought out scheme, we think, and it has the support of the urban design officers, their strong support. So we've landed on the side of recommending approval. I hope that provides some context for you.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Toby.
Okay, thanks, Toby. So, Katie, we'll go round for another round of any questions or comments, and then we'll come back to you, if that's all right. Yeah, councillors, if we can just do one more round, ideally, I think, and then come to the decision. So, I know there's a few hands up. Let me just make a note. Councillor. So, I'll just say a few words myself. So like Councillor Dryden, I feel that I don't have too many questions about this item. I can see what's in front of me. It looks like a good building. I think what Toby just said is useful in the sense of weighing up the comments of urban design, the urban design officer and the conservation officer, and the opposing comments of those officers. And obviously the case officer is the boss here. They're the one that makes the final decision on the recommendation. I live in Market Ward, like the councillor who's commented on the application, and I know the building quite well. It's an old building. It doesn't have any particular merit. I'm used to it being there. I can't say I'm attracted to it. On balance, I would prefer the modern building that is proposed to replace it. And in terms of the scheme, that's the other scheme that we looked at just a minute ago, I would say that's a much less good scheme, very convoluted and planning-wise and so on. And just the fact that it keeps the old bit at the front doesn't seem to add much to it for me. My question was a difficult question for the officer, really. Is just I was trying to weigh up the carbon matter, not only with regard to embedded carbon, but also carbon going forward. So obviously with a modern building of this type, I think it was BREEAM something excellent or good, I'm not sure, I can't remember. It will save a lot of energy going forward as it be better insulated and so on, which is good for the residents, future residents of this building. This end of the road, Newmarket Road, the other end is Maids Causeway going into town. They're sort of chalk and cheese. Maids Causeway is very, very smart looking, very historic, etc., etc. This end is more robust, urban. That doesn't mean to say that this building can't exist within that context. It can, and does in many cities around the world. You see old buildings that sit side by side with new buildings. I think, for me, on balance, I agree with the officer recommendation. And on that, with regard to what Toby said, I don't feel that it's such a fine balance myself. There is a balance there, but I feel that the balance is very much, for me, in favour of the new application and not rejecting the officer recommendation. So there's no questions there, but just a rhetorical statement. So I can't quite remember who was next to speak, actually, but I'm going to go with Councillor Pora, I think. But we'll go round everyone.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I do disagree with you on the balance, because I suppose when you look at paragraph 10.96, there is moderate, less than substantial harm to a conservation area. So we are obliged by NPPF to balance that against the public benefit. And, we've had this discussion many times, for example, with the King's College one, where for this, the public benefit, if there was no extant, obviously the public benefit would be 9 houses coming up, but we've already got that. So for me, the limited public benefit of slightly better flats, and I take the Chair's point that it's arranged better, this one, but we've still got no parking, we've got no disabled parking, no cargo bike, no loading bay, none of which are required. But for me, the public benefit isn't sufficient, because they could build out the extant, retaining that frontage, and also reducing the massing at the front, because I do think that's an issue coming up the road, that massing will be quite visually intrusive. So I'm afraid for me, I'm still sitting with that. I don't feel it's satisfied the public benefit test because of the extant permission. And we're always told by officers we need to give weight to the extant. So ironically, this time, well, I am. And I think it's a consistent approach with these special buildings, whichever part of the city they're in. They merit some protection, and public benefit for me has not yet been proven because it's already there with the extant. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough.
I find it's quite an interesting building, and I do find that sometimes retaining just a front and a side of a part of an interesting existing building can be less successful than a completely new building. But I do have my concerns about this building is to do with the how it's actually going to be constructed and in use. And I can't find a construction traffic management clause. I don't know if the officer could confirm that there is one. And I do feel that the cycle provision needs more detail. And I don't know whether under the existing clauses to do with landscaping, clause 6 and 7, whether there is enough in those clauses to for the officers to pick up concerns about inadequate cycling. I'm pleased that I think clause 28 is now clear that it will be 110 litres per person per day water use, but it needs to be shown that that can be achieved. So I'm assuming that that is sufficient to ensure that if this was to be approved, that each flat would have its own water meter. Clause 29 is interesting. It's about the carbon reduction statements. I'm really pleased to see that in here. My support on this would be contingent on construction, traffic management, and ensuring that more detail about the adequate cycle provision for 20 occupiers of the homes would be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak that I missed? No. Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bagent.
Just briefly, Chair, this is going to be a difficult decision, I think, for everybody. I think most of us have shown some balanced view. My concern, though, is when it's gone, it's gone. Once this thing gets knocked down, it's gone completely. So I don't like the carbuncle of effect of the previous planning permission. I don't think I'd be supporting that massively either. I really don't know. I've never been nearer to abstaining in my life, but I won't abstain.
Councillor, hopefully you can come to a conclusion at the end of it. Back to you, Katie. If you could particularly pick up on I think there was a keenness to get some response on disabled parking and policy requirement, that kind of thing, as well as the other questions, please.
In regard to the traffic management plan, condition 22 on page 64 asks for a traffic management plan. So hopefully that covers the highway impacts in regard to the construction. In regards to the bike parking and provision, consideration of adding a condition to require details of bike parking could be added to any consent granted, so that is picked up and considered in relation to that. Hopefully that answers all the questions. That's quite brief, but
There weren't many, no. Was there anything that got missed, councillors? No. Oh, disabled parking, policy compliance. If you want, Katie, I can ask Toby to.
Yeah, I'd have to just
Toby?
check with Toby on that one now.
Thanks, Chair. So our standards in, I think it's Appendix L, suggest that there should be some form of off-site disabled parking. In practice, certainly for kind of city centre sites, that has, in tight sites, that's been difficult on a number of sites to implement, and that has been tested at appeal as well, and inspectors have generally found that if you have a site that is accessible, for example, easily accessible by public transport, that there should be no absolute necessity for on-site disabled parking provisions. So I think I would strongly suggest that if members are minded not to support the proposal, that's not a reason that's carried forward, that the reason would relate primarily to the impacts of the loss of the building on the area.
On that, I'm presuming that the road, Newmarket Road, has parking on it. One of those could be a disabled parking space. Is that a different thing altogether, or can that be related to it, Toby?
Shay, through you, and I think Newmarket Road has quite significant parking restrictions. I mean, there is a public car park at the Grafton Centre that is not too far from this particular site.
I mean, I know there's residents' car parking on Newmarket Road, that one of those could be a disabled parking bay. Did you want to comment on that, Kate, or is that more a county council thing and not to do with planning? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I haven't got anything to add in regard to that, Chair. Thank you.
Is everyone content with questions and discussion? Okay, good. All right, we'll go to the vote then. So, Toby, can give us a recommendation, please?
Thanks, Chair. So the recommendation set on page 59 of the officer report, that is to approve the scheme subject to the conditions as set out and subject to an additional condition in relation to cycle parking provision.
Toby, all those in favour of that recommendation? All those against?
Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So the item's approved. So thanks very much for that. Thanks to the speakers. Thank you to the ward councillor. We'll just take a 5-minute break now and come back at 11:20. The next item. Thank you. the minutes then from earlier. So I've done that. So if we go live then, please, Claire. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. So the next item is item 6, 45 Barrow Road. Dominic Bush is the presenting officer. And we've got, are you Maggie? Oh, sorry, wrong one. Julia. Hi, Julia. Good morning. And is Maggie or Phil online then, are they? Anyway, we've got an objector to speak online and also ward councillor statement. Right, okay. So when you're ready then, Dominic, if you want to present the item, please.
Sure. Can I just confirm you can see the presentation?
See the presentation, all good, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you. So as you mentioned, this application is at 45 Barrow Road in Cambridge and is seeking permission for the demolition of a single garage, the erection of a 1.5-storey side extension, including integrated single garage, as well as a single-storey rear extension and alterations to the fenestration. There are no amendments or updates to note. So this is a location plan of the site highlighted in red. The property is bordered by number 43 Barrow Road to the north and number 47 to the south. Barrow Road runs to the west of the site, whilst to the eastern border of the site is Hobson's Brook. As you can see from the aerial plan on the right, the property is one of the few in the area that's orientated this way and does not extend the full width of its plot. This slide just shows the extent of the Barrow Road conservation area. Again, the site is highlighted in red in the southeast corner of the conservation area. This slide shows the existing and proposed front and rear elevations of the property. The 1.5-storey side extension is visible to the right-hand side of the front elevation, with the integrated garage here and a proposed first floor window that mimics the design of the one currently above the porch. Whilst the rear elevation shows clearly the large glaze element of the single-storey rear extension, as well as the side extension to the left. Here we have existing and proposed side elevations. There's little change to the northern elevation, whilst the single-storey rear extension is visible here to the left. To the south elevation, you can see the proposed side extension and how it relates to the existing roof line. The Velux windows within the extension are high-level windows that serve the garage on the ground floor. This is existing and proposed ground floor plans, showing the detached garage to the south down here, and which is to be demolished and replaced with the side extension here, and how it relates to the boundary of the site here, as well as the single-storey rear extension, which is larger in scale to the right. This is existing and proposed first floor plans, so it shows a more modest increase to the property at this level, with the flat roof of the rear extension here, which has got a condition attached to be a green roof, as well as the first floor additions to the side here. And finally, the existing and proposed roof plans, again, how the side extension relates to the existing roof, as well as the large flat green roof to the rear elevation, and the demolished existing garage here. So here are some photos of the site. Firstly, the front elevation taken from Barrow Road. The proposed side extension will be sited to the right-hand side here. And then this is the southern elevation viewed from within the rear garden. So again, the side extension would be sited here, and the existing detached garage is just visible to the left here. This is a view to the north from within the rear garden, looking towards number 43. As you can see, the rear elevation of number 43 is set further forward from the rear elevation of number 45 as existing. This is again from the rear garden looking south towards number 47. There are no first floor windows to note within the side elevation of number 47 that look towards number 45. And now we just have some photos of other rear extensions of a more modern design within the Barrow Road conservation area. So firstly, this is the adjacent property to the north, again with a more modern rear extension with large glazed elements to the rear. This is another larger, more modern rear extension within further to the west along Barrow Road in the conservation area, again with a large glazed element to the rear. And finally, this is another extension within Barrow Road conservation area with a similar integrated garage to the right-hand side of the property. So the key considerations, there is a objection from the conservation officer relating to the scale of the proposed development and stating that it would cause harm to the conservation area. It's considered that the development is acceptable in relation to its harm to neighbour amenities. It should be noted the application is proposing the removal of 2 trees, whilst the trees officer holds no objection to the proposal. And in terms of the biodiversity, the ecology officer has no objection to the proposal following the submission of a light level study taken from the rear border of the plot, and the officer recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. Okay, so the first speaker is...
I've received a written statement from Mr. and Mrs. Hastings, which I can...
Okay, so we've got a statement from Mr. and Mrs. Hastings who are objecting to the scheme. So, Chris, if you wouldn't mind reading it out, is it going to be 3 minutes or less, is it, I presume?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay, you go ahead then, if you don't mind, thank you.
Statement of objection regarding number 45 Barrow Road, 22-02761-HFUL. Number 45 is in its original structural state. Neighbors' smaller developments were before the designation of the conservation area. The conservation officer states that with reference to the NPPF and the effect on the significance of the heritage asset, paragraphs 194, 195, 199, 200, 202 apply. Cambridge City Local Plan, Policy 58. The appearance is transformed front and back. It is not sympathetic to the existing building, with unashamedly modern rear, or the conservation area in scale, more than doubling the footprint, or by the use of materials or character, using rendering and big sections of glazing on both the ground floor and the first floor. Number 43's garden would be overlooked. The conservation officer says the proposals don't comply with Policy 58. Policy 61. Number 45 sits where the footpath in the Hobson's Brook designated Cambridge City Wildlife Site runs, closest to the conservation area, and all floors are clearly visible from it. The development would spoil views within the conservation area and from outside it. According to a comment from a Long Road resident, the public path is used all through the day by people who enjoy the timeless peace and space it offers. To have a frankly enormous structure advancing down the garden would significantly impact the pleasure of a very significant number of members of the public. The proposals overwhelm the original house. The rear alterations blur the distinction between buildings in and outside the conservation area. The conservation officer says the proposals don't comply with Policy 61. Barrow Road Conservation Area. The conservation area guidance recognizes the garden's sense of enclosure and privacy. Due to its orientation, number 45 has windows on its north side overlooking the top of number 43's garden. Privacy at the bottom of the garden is especially valuable. The picture windows over 2 floors and extended terrace would overlook the bottom and full width of number 43's garden. One public comment says, if the proposal goes ahead, there will be no point in the conservation area at all. The conservation officer says the proposal would not preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. Considering the NPPF local plan policies and Barrow Road Conservation Area appraisal, the conservation officer's assessment, the views of Cambridge past, present, and future, and strong public opposition, we urge you to reject this planning application. Thank you. Dr. and Mrs. Hastings, number 43 Barrow Road.
Thanks for kindly reading it out, Chris. So now we've got Julia James, the applicant. Julia, if you want to sit there, and it's the right-hand button on it, that's it. So you've got 3 minutes to speak when you're ready. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of our planning application. My name is Julia James, and my husband and I bought 45 Barrow Road earlier this year. We currently live in Halton, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to live with our 2 children in such a beautiful part of Cambridge. Our hope is to create a long-term family home, preserving the arts and crafts style of the house itself, and also modernising it through several improvements. We have engaged professional advisors with relevant experience to help us ensure we do justice to the character of the building, preserve trees and wildlife, and create an energy-efficient home for us to live for many years to come. For example, we hope to improve the performance of the building by adding insulation, energy-efficient glass, and solar panels. We plan to use high-quality materials to improve existing features, for example, replacing existing modern windows with Crittall style so that they are more in keeping with the architectural style of the street. We appreciate the importance of preserving the public views from the road at the front of the property. The existing low-quality, flat-roofed garage is not original. It abuts the boundary to the south, and it is unusable because it is too small for a modern car. Our proposed replacement garage, which includes provision for electric vehicles, is incorporated within the cat slide roof design. We chose this design in order to preserve and enhance the existing building style, improve the placement of the property on the plot by creating a gap between the properties, and maintain the openness contemplated by the Barrow Road Conservation Area appraisal. The trees to the rear of the house will still form a visible backdrop to the property, given the form and layout of our proposals. Beyond the rear boundary of the property to the east is a wooded area surrounding Hobson's Brook. We appreciate and value its significance to local wildlife and have sought to minimise the impact of our proposed development by maintaining all the tree coverage and minimising light pollution. Before submitting our planning application, my husband and I discussed the plans with residents of Barrow Road, including immediate neighbours. We amended the plans as a result of their comments, for example, by reducing the proximity and height of the proposed rear extension closest to the northern boundary of the property, and by relocating the skylights in the roof of the proposed rear extension. We have also offered to intensify the planting to the north of our property. We truly value the style and quality of the property as well as the conservation area in which it is located. We are happy to accept all the conditions proposed by the planning officer, including the green roof to the proposed rear extension. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thanks, Julia. Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. So, Councillor Hawke has sent in a statement to be read out. Not here today to speak to us. So, as some of us have said before, we prefer councillors to come to speak to us really and spend some time with us rather than sending in these statements, but there you go. If you'd like to read that then please, Chris.
I called planning application 22-02761-HFUL, extension to number 45 Barrow Road, in for scrutiny at a full planning committee because it raises several material concerns with respect to the Barrow Road conservation area, the local plan, and the national planning policy framework. The proposal's scale and design seem wholly inappropriate in a conservation area. It could spoil the public view from the street as well as from the public footpath in the wooded area in the back. The neighbors have valid concerns relating to being overlooked by the proposed picture windows at the rear. The large areas of glazing on 2 floors may cause light pollution. I refer the committee to the response of this application of Conservation Officer Paul Robertshaw, who concludes that the development would not preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. Paul's response form of 4th August 2022 describes the property and its current positive contribution to the Barrow Road conservation area, assesses the proposals, and concludes that they would not comply with local plan policies 58 and 61. He states that with reference to the NPPF and the effect on the significance of the heritage asset, paragraphs 194, 195, 199, 200, 202 apply. I find his assessment compelling. Councillor Olaf Hauck.
Thanks for reading that out, Chris. Right, okay, so Councillor Debate. Councillor Dryden.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you to Mrs James. What she had to say was quite a good talk, and it's actually answered some questions that I would have asked, but sounds like they're very good neighbours. Again, twice in a row, I think I've got to go along with the officer's recommendation, and what really done it for me, the photos of other extensions in the area. I mean, that's already happening, and what I see and what I've heard here, it seems very good, so I've got no objections to it, so I shall go along with the officer's recommendation.
just in case the office doesn't pick it up, I think some of those extensions were pre-conservation area status. So, Councillor Wood.
I just had one query really, which was the width of the passage, the new passage that will be going from front to rear on the south side. I mean, this is really a comment, but the south side did look rather flat, but that's, I think, because, would you call it the kind of roof, cat slide roof, you can't see it terribly well. And the other, and I'm really pleased to hear that you're looking at energy efficient, I think, windows, just if that could be confirmed, and that the flat roof would allow both green roof and solar. This is also more of a comment. I don't think it's really for planning, but I was a little bit confused with the ground floor extension on the north side. There seemed to be a lot of small rooms, and I wonder what they were. 11, 27, 23, and 12 on the plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There's a couple of things I was going to clarify, and I forgot to do it, so I'll just do that briefly now. So NPPF is National Planning Policy Framework, that was mentioned, and Crittall Windows is a brand of window that mimics the windows that were made in the 1930s, and this house is from the 1930s, so that's why that's applicable. Who was next? I didn't see. Councillor Thornborough.
I don't have too much objection to the extension at the back, but I have real concerns about the effect on the overall effect of the conservation area. I think there are times when you do an extension or you do alterations where you don't distinguish between, you do it in the style of the existing. But in this case, I think it would have been there is no recognition of the existing building and how an extension could be done to acknowledge the existing building and make it subservient. And it overwhelms and loses the effect of the existing building. I find it overbearing, and I support the concerns about the conservation officer. I also think that we brought this up before, where somebody is looking to build a large property, but there is nothing about bike parking. I do not understand how a house of this size could be considered without you've got so much space, but nothing has been allowed for bike parking. And that part of Trumpington is very accessible, and it should be a real focus and integral part of the design as per our policy, and there's nothing about that. I also think that, again, this is weighing up public benefit versus the detriment to significance of the conservation area. But what is the public benefit? This is going from a single dwelling and remains a single dwelling. In the previous application, it was providing 9 dwellings. So what is the public benefit that we gain in this instance? I don't believe there is any public benefit, and I think the harm outweighs a lack of public benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagent.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself less in accord with the Conservation Officer this time. This is a estate that is part of a conservation area, probably because it's all nice big houses and it represents how nice big houses develop in an area. And I think that we should recognise that. This is a nice big house. I like it, looks good. Why we should object to it being extended, I don't understand. I'd prefer if they divided it and subdivided it and made it into lots of other houses or other apartments or something like that, so we could improve the density. But here's somebody bought a house and is extending it. I have one exception, and that is about cycle parking. we're very keen on asking for cycle parking in so-called ordinary dwellings. We like it at the front. I would ask that if we can condition a cycle shed at the front of the house somewhere so that people can park their bikes. There's going to be children in the house, I understand. Those children should be encouraged to be cycling. We're currently going through a rather stormy period about whether we're going to have less or more cars on the roads in Cambridge. This area is well connected to cycle routes and people should be encouraged to cycle. So I'd like to see if we can put a condition on cycle shed in the front garden. Because you can't just build a cycle shed in the front garden in a conservation area without permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Porrer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do tend to agree with the officer on this one. I think the front does retain sort of the character of the houses, particularly as this is an odd one and that it is turned the other way. So I just had a few questions. Could the officer just confirm the frontage remains the same in effect? Because obviously the plans we've got don't quite show that. And I would be interested in talking about cycle parking, though I appreciate because it's a conversion, we may have less power. Could the officer also confirm solar PV? I think one of the drawings shows it, but one of them doesn't. So, and there's not a condition about it, but I noticed the applicant mentioned they were definitely having it, so I'd quite like that to be part of the plans if that's the case. I do have some concerns about this contrasting modern versus old, but I appreciate that's a personal thing, but I do, as Councillor Dryden says, having seen some of the other houses in the area with rear extensions, this doesn't actually appear to be particularly out of keeping. The other thing, the path along the back, I noticed, I think one of the objectors mentioned that the public walking along it would have less good views, but my understanding is that isn't a material planning condition because obviously a right to a view is not protected. So just be grateful if the officer could comment on it. And also whether things like the Crittall windows in the officer's view do enhance the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Councillor Thornborough makes a good point about how you can't really see the difference between the existing and the proposed, especially in terms of that sort of roofscape on the front elevation and sort of big expanse of tiles there that you can see in the elevation. Although I wonder whether you'd actually take that in, as it were, in real life when you walk along the street. I suppose the difference I'd have with Councillor Thornborough on that point is that this isn't a different extension. What I mean by that is often those sorts of extensions are modern extensions, glass and steel, that kind of thing, and you make a real difference between old and new. This is literally trying to sort of mimic the existing and grow the existing into a bigger building. And on the size of building, I said before with these bigger houses that I think the average square meterage in the UK is something like 76 square meters for a dwelling, and this, the existing is 129. It's proposed to grow it to 318. Well, 318 square meters is not the biggest we've seen. We've seen houses up to 550 square meters, I think I remember in this committee. So in terms of, you know, the increase in size, it's not that huge. It's a big house, but I mean, it's not something which you could be concerned about in any way. There's nothing to do with policy there. As long as it's policy compliant, which it is, then that's the end of the story on that, I think, really. I think could argue this is an on-balance decision, I think, to some extent, although we're not planning to knock it down, not in its totality anyway, like the last item. But I think certainly for me, the front elevation, which is critical, I think, onto the street, the existing is more beautiful than the proposed. For me, in my own personal opinion, I have some experience of architecture. I do know a little bit what I'm talking about, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The applicant is the beholder in this context, if you like. And obviously it's about function as well as look. Function is also a thing of beauty. And the applicant wants to use the house to live in with their family and live in sustainably. So I think that's important. So on balance, I support the officer recommendation of approval as far as I can see so far. Any more questions for the officer? No. Okay, back to you then, please, Dominic.
Thank you. Hopefully I've got them all down. The first one, in regards to the width of the passageway to the south of the property, is approximately 1.1 metres on the proposed. The PV, so the side extension, the proposed side elevation for the side extension shows PV panels on there. There might potentially be possibility for it with on the flat roof of the single-story rear extension as well. In terms of cycle parking, I'm not aware of existing, but it could be possible to add an informative that the proposed integrated garage could be used for cycle parking. The local plan policy on cycle parking doesn't normally engage with householders, but it could be informative, could be added for the garage to be used as cycle parking. And then I think the other one was regarding the public benefit. If I could refer to Toby on the public benefit question.
Thank you, Dominic. Let's talk on tick. Okay, so, Councillor Howard, you won't be able to vote on this item. You understand that, or debate? Or debate the item. Keith, let you speak.
Yeah, through you, Councillor Howard. At what time did you join this session? Were you here at the beginning of this item?
I was not.
Okay, well, in that case, as you appreciate, we will need to sit the vote out. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Keith. Right. Where were we? Back to debate. Just before I go back to, yeah, I got you. Yeah, okay, Councillor Walter-Wood and Councillor Bora. Just to say that response from the officer about cycle parking using the garaging facilities would not be quite what we were getting at, because normally we prefer cycle parking to be at the front of the house. And just on that, I'd be interested to know councillors and officer opinion. I mean, does it need to be a little shed or a building? Can we just throw our bike on the grass? Is that not cycle parking? There's a big space here. I mean, it's not quite the same as a dense urban area, is it? But Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
My reason for asking the width of the path to the back is actually about getting things like bikes through to the back. It is disappointing that the garage itself, you know, as Councillor Thornborough has raised, the garage and the bedroom next to it aren't designed to have space for cycle parking. But I appreciate we're not here to redesign design the proposal or the application here. And I wonder whether it was possible to have an informative on solar panels, please. I appreciate that they're on some of the plans mentioned, but if we can't have a condition, then an informative.
Thank you, Councillor. If you just want to turn your microphone off, thank you very much. Councillor Bora.
To come back, I don't think the officer answered my question, just to confirm that views from the path along the back are not a material planning consideration, and just to confirm the frontage, that the building is sitting in exactly the same front line, because obviously that would be the sensible place. And in answer to your question, it would be quite nice to have covered cycling parking, if we could, at the front.
Thank you for that. Can you just be clear on the question that the officer didn't answer, please?
So I think the objector noted that there's a path along the back that people walk along, and that having a large extension would be detrimental to their views, but my understanding is a view isn't a protected thing. Therefore, it isn't a planning consideration. I was just wanting to clarify that partly so the objector could hear that from the officers. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Bajan.
Thank you. I return again to the question of a cycle covering in the front garden. We've insisted on this in certain premises that we've approved. We've sent things back because they didn't have parking in the front. I think this is an important issue. I'm sure that the applicant won't be against this, but I know that we shouldn't be redesigning. I don't want to vote against something because it doesn't have cycle parking in the front garden. I'm sure we can put on a requirement for that.
Thank you. Councillor Dryden.
Yeah, I think you did mention it about the cycle parking. I can see where it is important in some areas, but with a property like this so big, I think it's up to them where they want to store their cycles. And And I'm just going back to a few years ago where actually it was a councillor, I think, in Newnham, put a shed in the front garden in a conservation area, and they actually got in trouble for it, had to remove it. So when you've got big properties like this, why do you want a cycle shed in your front garden when you've got loads of room to put cycles elsewhere? I had an extension myself recently, and I put my cycles, I don't cycle personally, but my wife does, we put it in the garage, which isn't that up to the individuals where they live, where they put their cycles?
I think in general, Councillor, if I may, I agree with you that with an individual house, it's somewhat different to blocks of flats or commercial setups, you know, with multiple spaces for bikes. I think it's a different thing, but I can understand the importance of having accessible cycle parking for future residents and so on. But Toby, you want to come back on a couple of things, please?
I did. Thanks, Chair. Just to rewind to Councillor Thornborough's question around public benefit. So the officer position is set out at paragraph 10.28. We have diverged from the Conservation Officer's assessment of harm. Our consideration, particularly in relation to the front side extension, is that no harm arises to the conservation area and that the rear extension successfully contrasts. So we are saying to members that the public benefit test is not engaged in this particular scenario. In relation to cycle parking, our policies aren't engaged for extensions to houses. I think we've been over this issue before as a committee, and the proposal does not expressly incorporate within it any mention of cycle parking provision to the front of the property. Would not be able to reasonably include a condition to require something to the front because it doesn't form part of the proposal. Not that we could, given that we don't have a policy position to support it. So I think the case officer's suggestion that we have an informative for that integrated garage to potentially be used as a cycle parking provision for the homeowners is not an unreasonable one to take. And lastly, there was a reference to whether views from the rear are a material consideration. If they are public views, then yes, so. But also, when you're considering the impact of a proposal on a conservation area, it is not just public views that the committee have to consider, but also views from private gardens are material. They carry less weight, but they are material because they go to whatever you're doing within the conservation area. It impacts its character, whether it's publicly viewable or not. It's just that public viewpoints carry more weight in terms of your consideration. I hope that helps. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Toby. So just to be clear, slightly technical language there, Toby, when you say our policies aren't engaged, recycle parking, you mean that there is no policy compliance issue there. We don't need to ask the applicant to provide cycle parking. But I think I'd go slightly further than you, Toby, if I may. I mean, I think the informative could, rather than ask for cycle parking in the garage that's already proposed, but we could have an informative where we could ask the applicant to consider cycle parking at the front of the property. I mean, it's only an informative after all. They can choose to ignore the informative should they so wish. It's not a condition. I would have thought that was reasonable in terms of what's been said around the room so far anyway. Councillors, any more comments? Councillor Bajan.
Chair, if we adopt your proposal, which I thoroughly support, does that mean that the proposal can build, or the permission will be for a structure in the front garden, or will they have to then apply again to get that?
It's a good question, Councillor. Any more questions before I go back to the officer? No. Okay. Dominic, did you get the thrust of that question? I hope so.
I think so. So as far as I am aware, if we had an informative for a bike shed in the front garden, it would need a separate application, given that it's forwarded the front elevation of the property. I don't know if there are any other questions that needed answering.
So if I understand rightly, just to be clear to listeners, is this is a conservation area. In order to have a cycle shed type thing in the front garden, it would mean there would need to be a planning application to do that, even though we as the planning committee might be recommending an informative to do so to the applicant. Any more questions? Councillor Dryden.
Just carrying on from there, so in theory our recommendation could be refused.
Say that again, Councillor.
Our recommendation, or going back to this bicycle shed, we're asking for it, but we could be refused then.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, in that case, we'll go to the recommendation then from Toby, please.
Thanks, Chair. So the recommendation is set out on page 82 of the agenda pack, and that is to approve subject to the conditions as set out and subject to two informatives, one in relation to cycle parking, referencing possible use of the garage and encouraging an application for cycle parking to be made to the front of the property, and the other informative in relation to solar panels. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Toby. So the office recommendation is one of approval. All those in favour of that recommendation?
That's 6, Chair.
Thank you. Against? The office recommendation is approved. Thank you very much. We've got one more item. Shall we carry on? Yeah? Or do you want to have a break for lunch? No one? Everyone's carrying on? Okay. So I don't think we need another 5-minute break, do we? Does anyone need a rest break? No? Okay. So next item then is item number 7, 78 Arbury Road. And the presenting officer is Alice. You're here, Alice. Hello. So no public speakers on this item. So in that case, I think, Alice, if are you all set up, ready to go? I'll give you a minute. See it on our screens now, Alice. Can you do laser pointer or not?
Sorry, I haven't done it face to face before, so.
Great, that's great. Okay, when you're ready then, thanks.
Brilliant. So the application is at 78 Arbury Road, and it's for the change of use to a 9-bed HMO for 10 people, sui generis use. Arbury Road comprises a 2-storey semi-detached dwelling set within a long, thin plot, with the dwelling set back approximately 14 metres from the street. The site falls outside of the conservation area and controlled parking zone, and the site falls predominantly within the residential area, aside from the North Academy School, which is further north of the site. And other services towards the Arbury Road and Milton Road junction.
Alice, sorry to interrupt. Can you speak up a bit, please, so we might not be possible to hear anything otherwise.
Further to the south east of the site. The site is located in a highly sustainable location with good access to bus and cycle links, alongside 2 district centres and associated facilities within walking distance. The application is for, as I said earlier, change of use of the property, currently in C3 use as a dwelling house, to a 9-bed, 10-person house of multiple occupation. The application is solely for the change of use, not any extensions to the existing dwelling. So I'll go through the plans now. So this is the block plan. This is the ground floor plan showing both the communal rooms alongside some of the bedrooms at ground floor. All bedrooms meet the minimum internal standard, with the majority exceeding the requirements and having access to private ensuite bathrooms. All bedrooms would have a good outlook and ventilation. And in terms of communal space, this comprises a kitchen and a separate living room at ground floor. This is considered sufficient to accommodate the number of occupiers given the proportions of these rooms and the generous size of the bedrooms, to mitigate against any spillouts of activity to the garden. I'll go through. These are first floor plans showing the bedrooms further. And then the second floor plans. So this is in the roof. And then these are the proposed and existing elevations. So this is the front elevation fronting Arbury Road. This is the side and rear on the other side. So as you will have seen from the amendment sheet, I've been out to site to measure the side access to ensure that the pedestrian wheeling a cycle can pass through the access to the rear, to access the rear store. This access width was measured at 1 metre, which is insufficient to allow a pedestrian to wheel a cycle through. So in light of that, we are now recommending that condition 4 is altered to secure the provision of a new purpose-built cycle store in the front garden. There's sufficient space within the front garden, as shown on the screen now, to provide car parking and this cycle storage. In terms of bins, condition 6 secures the details of a purpose-built bin store as well. So just to conclude, officers consider that the development would provide a good quality living environment for future occupiers without causing harm to the character of the area or surrounding residential occupiers. The site is in a highly sustainable location conducive to HMOs, and there is not an over-concentration of large-scale HMOs in this area. Taking this into account, officers consider that the proposal complies with local plan policies, and therefore officers' recommendation is one of approval subject to conditions. The condition 4 revised is on the screen now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alice. Over to councillors. So, Councillor Porritt.
Chair, it is quite good to see an HMO with reasonable sized bedrooms that are exceeding the space standard, so I'm grateful for that. I just wondered if the office could comment, page 91, paragraph 10.26, you're talking about 3 parking spaces, but say we could do 2, but I couldn't work out which we were doing. And I'm guessing if we are moving the cycle parking to the front, it might be prudent to look at 2. I just wasn't quite clear what we were being asked to agree there. I'm happy to reduce it because obviously it is sustainable, but could someone just clarify? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thornborough.
I'm concerned that this is being considered for only 10 people because in our space, the national space standards, the space for a single room is 7.5 square metres and space for a double room is 11.5. So the information we've got it shows us the sizes of the rooms, but they're way over the national prescribed standards and for the double room. So you could easily accommodate 2 people in the larger rooms. And I feel that actually there could be as many as 16 people in this house. So my concern is the amount of amenity space in terms of the common room and the kitchen for the potential number of people living in this home. That's my concern. Whether the amenity space is adequate.
And his space standards don't apply for HMOs. I think it does say that in 10.34. But it's good that the bedrooms are bigger, but I'll let Alice come back on that. Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
I share some of Councillor Thornborough's concerns that even if this is meant to be for 9, 10 people, that there will be more people living there. And as such, I'm also concerned that if you have, each of them has a visitor who might be or might not be staying over, we could end up with more than 20 people. Now, I appreciate that this property is close to an existing guest house, and it's not abutting, as I understand, it's not abutting housing at the back, not directly. But I do worry about nearby residences and noise. Noise, if we have visitors parking, and then coming out onto, and if they are parking using vehicles, getting in and out from Arbury Road, which can at times get quite congested. And also you have a cycle path that you've got to contend crossing if you are reversing or coming out with a car. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, back to you then, Alice, please. Sorry, did I miss somebody? Hang on, Alice. Councillor Dryden. Agent first.
Chair, I'm just a little concerned. I don't know if this is even a conditionable thing about toilets. There's one toilet on the second floor, which is, if it's in use as a shower, a washroom or a toilet, the door will be shut. I think it's a communal washroom for one person. So if anybody wants to go to the toilet on the second floor, as long as the toilet's not occupied, that's okay. But if it is occupied, where do they go? Because if you go down the floor, it only shows a bathroom, it doesn't show a toilet. And on the ground floor, I don't think there's anything either. So people who are using the common room and the kitchen have no direct access to a toilet. So it's that first floor bathroom, which isn't specified as having a toilet in, that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, a practical question. I'm not sure if the planning matter there, but I'll let Alice answer that. Councillor Dryden.
Interested in the size of the rooms being too big for one person. I mean, or then you're saying there could be too many in there, which would be then overcrowding. I'd wonder if is that a planning issue, as said, because I just thought if we're going to say there's too many people in a building, I think the council have lots of questions asked that, because I know lots of council houses where the families are too big and they have to put up with living in overcrowding.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Poore.
Councillor Thornborough makes a good point about the size of the room. I'm pretty certain on previous HMOs we have added a condition that specifies they must only rent it to the maximum people allowed. Could we potentially add that? Because I think, as Councillor Dryden said, there could be some enforcement. It may not be through planning, but I'm certain we've done that for other HMOs where we've actually specified it has to comply with the fact that it's 10 people and not 16 people in double bedrooms.
We had this conversation before about another item, and we had a wide-ranging conversation about controlling people's lives. I mean, if you're a chap and you rent a room and you get a girlfriend and they want to move in with you, are you going to say they have to move out to go and live somewhere together? That doesn't seem right. But anyway, Alice, come back on it all, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a few points, but I'll take that one first. So condition 3 restricts the number of occupiers to no more than 10. That's what they've applied for. So we're restricting it to 10. I understand that those rooms are quite sizable, but ultimately we do have control of that. That's standard procedure on HMOs, just for your information. in terms of Councillor Pora's comment regarding car and cycle space to the front and whether that there is sufficient room, there is. I've measured it. It's quite a sizable front garden. It's currently all hard standing, basically at the moment. So in terms of, you know, encroaching upon landscaping, it wouldn't occur. We've got condition 5, which secures the parking layout. There is sufficient space at the moment to turn a vehicle and exit onto Arbury Road. What I was saying in the report is, obviously, for a dwelling house, we have standards which are a maximum standard for car parking in the city, and it's not something we want to go beyond. And I think in this instance, 2 is probably fair, but given its sustainable location, I don't think that it's necessary to have those 2 car parking spaces. So I've kind of conditioned it accordingly. And then obviously the revised condition 4 will cover the siting and appearance and size of the cycle store. Regarding Councillor Bajent's concern to do with the toilets, there are quite a lot of toilets within the whole footprint of the HMO. There are, shall we say, not public, but communal toilets at first and second floor. And I would presume that if any guests did come over that were kind of hosted by the occupiers that lived in the ground floor bedrooms, that they would offer access to their ensuite bathrooms. But given that there are communal toilets within the HMO, we don't have any concerns regarding access to facilities for visitors. Regarding noise, this was addressed within the report under the residential amenity section, but ultimately there is a permitted development fallback for 6 people in an HMO. They can do that without planning permission. So we've assessed the additional people. So that would be 4 additional people. And given that there are sufficient both private and communal facilities, we don't think that there's going to be kind of socialising, spilling out to the garden that would then, you know, travel to neighbours. Regarding comings and goings, they are quite significantly wide plots. So in terms of the impact from coming and goings, we don't think it's going to be significant to surrounding occupiers. Also, I'd like to note that Environmental Health don't have any objections to the application, and they often they have to look at the noise and disturbance impact to surrounding neighbours. And then another point was made regarding highway safety, and I'd just like to add that County Highways Development Management don't have any highway safety concerns. So we don't have any concerns regarding highway safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Any more? Councillor Pora.
Just a quick about the common room. There doesn't actually appear to be any windows. Is that okay in compliance terms? Because interesting, they put the kitchen at the back and the common room in the middle. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dryden.
Actually, when in the report, this is one of the objections, was that there was too many toilets because it could interfere with the sewerage system.
Okay, and so just to be clear, the cycle store is the thing that's called the proposed bin store in the documentation, and there's room for 12 cycles, it looks like, with 6 Sheffield stands. It's a kind of cheap and cheerful construction, it seems to me. Softwood cladding, I can't read what's on the roof, but would we not be wanting a green roof with a different sort of quality of structure? Ideally, this is not going to support a green roof at the moment. Don't know if you answer that, Alice. Any more questions for Alice? No. Okay, back to you then, Alice.
I'm just going to reshare my screen, so bear with me a moment. So with regards to Councillor Pora's comment regarding windows to the communal rooms, this side door and two windows on the side serve the second communal room, so not the kitchen but the living area. So there are windows for both of the communal rooms. With regards to Councillor Smart's comment regarding the cycle store, we are proposing a new condition because the converted structure, which was originally proposed, you have to go down the side access, which is not big enough. So we've now revised condition 4 to ensure that a cycle store is provided in the front garden, and you'll see that there is reference to a green roof in that condition if it is a flat or monopitch roof. So those aspects have been covered also. So thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Sorry, I didn't see it when you flipped over first time. Good, okay. If there's no other questions then, we'll go to recommendation. Okay, Toby, please.
Thanks, Chair. So the recommendations set out on page 95 of the reports pack, that is to approve, subject to the conditions as set out and subject to the replacement of condition 4 with the revised condition 4 as set out on the amendment sheet.
Thank you. So all those in favour of the recommendation of approval?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you very much. Alice. Okie doke. So we've got that's the end of the planning items. We've got another 3 items. GCSP Planning Compliance Policy Report, Site Visit Policy City Report and Appeals Overview, all of which might take a little bit of time. You might want to comment on it. They're mostly to note. Shall we have a lunch break and come back to those, or is anyone keen to plough on? I don't really mind myself. Lunch? Okay, we'll have a lunch break then, so half an hour, come back at 10 to 1, please. Thanks very much. Claire. Okay, welcome back to the afternoon session. So we're finished with planning items. We've got 3 other items to mostly note, I think. The first one is item 8, planning compliance policy report, and Heather is going to talk to that.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Heather Jones, and I'm the Assistant Director for Planning and Building Quality. I'm here just to present the report for you on our new compliance policy. So this is to bring together the separate compliance policies that we have for Greater Cambridge Shared Planning. So to align them from both councils, both partner councils, to make sure that we're providing the same service for both. We took the opportunity at the same time to review it, but there is no major amendments to it. And I just wanted to say, so this is, the recommendation is for us to note the updated compliance policy and for it to be submitted for public consultation. That will take a period of 6 weeks, basically to account for the holiday period in December. So just some background. Members will be aware that we've been reviewing the planning enforcement team of Greater Cambridge Shared Planning. That's now concluded. We have included in that a review of our processes, the use of IT to improve our workflow, and an opportunity to update the website, including updated guidance, a video, and lots of information to provide it much easier for our residents to be able to report planning non-compliance. We have a new online form, and that allows us to integrate into our back office, which is a really important move forward, and we can now be much more proactive in responding to members of the public. I don't propose to say anything else. I think that covers it, and I'm assuming everyone's read the report. So if I can take any questions, thank you.
Any questions, councillors, or comments? It's only to note, obviously, but yes, Councillor Pora.
Thank you. Sorry, that was rather quicker than I thought, so I haven't quite finished my notes. But no, this is really welcome. Thank you so much, because I think merging it together is sensible. And I have to say, the new enforcement thing has been positively received by the soft launch. I just had some really, really minor queries. Page 108, paragraph 5.2. Just thinking when this goes out for consultation, we talk about the timescale after the site visit. So it'll say within 20 working days of site visit, but we don't give a timescale for the site visit unless it's urgent. So I just wondered if that might want to be tidied up before it goes to consultation, because I'm assuming someone will point that out. I think it's implied that the site visit would be quick, but I think if we are having non-urgent cases, it would just be useful to set out what our expectation is for when there would be a site visit. And I think, again, the same for the report back to committee. It would be really helpful to have a clear layout when you're reporting back on monthly ones, because sometimes we sort of had a list and it's kind of a bit unclear as to like where we are through the list. So, you know, which are new, which have been decided. So, but I'm sure that will come. And the other thing I just wondered, where are we? The one, it would be really nice, paragraph 16, to maybe have some case studies, you know, so we can say to people, here's an example of a, you know, an enforcement where we couldn't take action, because I think sometimes that speaks louder to people than just words. You know, so those are my comments, but it's very, very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Apologies, Councillor Bajan, I started without you. I didn't realise you weren't in the room. But Heather's just introduced the report and it's to note, so we're just asking questions on that. And I'll collect up a few questions if that's okay, Heather, go around the room. So, Councillor Thornborough.
Thank you for the update. Could you update us on any improvements or progress on complaints being received, the number of complaints and how successfully we're dealing with them? Thank you.
Any more questions, councillors? Okay, Heather, if you're ready to respond then, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. In respect of your comments, Councillor Porra, Yes, we can make that clearer. That's absolutely fine. And we will make that clearer in the report. It is a draft report and it is out for comments, so that's really positive. We can take back your comments in respect of the reports, and we're happy to make sure that they are being they are written in a clear way for you. And we'd appreciate your help in that as well to make sure that's great. And case studies, absolutely, really great idea, and we will include those. We're also going to draw up a flow chart to make it easier, so it'll be much more visual for people. We will probably include them on the website rather than in the policy itself. Really happy to do that, thank you. Councillor Thornborough, yes, the improvement in complaints has been incredible, I think, over the last 9 months. So we have made great strides in that. We are much more responsive and we are able to deal with complaints in a more timely manner. We're also doing this through our checking our performance, but also checking workloads to make sure that the team members' cases or number of cases are allocated, shared fairly across the team. You do know we have had some issues with recruitment, but we have managed to recruit a permanent new compliance manager. He will start with us in the new year, 3rd of January, and he's got over 20 years experience. So we're really pleased to have secured him to come and join Greater Cambridge Shared Planning. Thank you.
Good, that's all good news. Good to hear. Any more questions that you've since thought of? No. Okay, that's good then. So the report is to note. So thanks, Heather, for speaking to that. So we move on to item 9. This is called the Site Visit Policy City Report. I think, Toby, you're going to say a few words on that.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief. So this has come about in order to be consistent across all 3 committees, South Cambs, City and the Joint Development Control Committee, in terms of an officer approach. So the report sets out who's making the decision on whether a site visit is required, and that would be the relevant development manager in consultation with the relevant chair of the particular committee. The recommendation is just to note and to agree the implementation of the site visit protocol. In particular, I'll just draw members' attention to para 3.8 on page 127. This effectively states that members are encouraged to attend organised site visits, and in the event that this is not possible and members wish to independently visit, the site visit should be undertaken from public land only, with contact with applicants and objectors being avoided, and that is to avoid a potential perception of bias either from objectors or applicants. Chair, I don't have anything else to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Toby. I mean, I was just saying to Toby myself, I remember a few years ago when I first started on planning committee being at a site, on a site, and had a councillor turned up at the same time, just completely coincidentally, and I think we spent half an hour or something looking out of an objector's bedroom at the site, and we all thought that was a good idea, gaining more evidence and so on, and there was no intention on our part to be at all biased or anything like that. We just wanted to do a good job and be good councillors. But we live in a more litigious society these days, unfortunately, and so what Toby said, is the fact of the matter, and so we all have to go a lot more careful and, and pay respect to the policy. So, sorry, Councillor Thornborough, yeah.
Toby, could you just advise about when a scheme is in before application? There's a lot more public consultation, and we as committee members do get approached by possible applicants or developers to engage. How about in those circumstances? Can we visit the site because it's not yet an application?
Do you want to answer that, Toby?
Yeah, so I think the specific advice is if a developer has approached members specifically, that there should be an officer present at either the online briefing or if the briefing is in person. I'm aware that there are a number of those requests being made of councillors at the moment. I know of at least 3. And ordinarily, the developers of those sites have entered into formal pre-application discussions with officers, or they've entered into a planning performance agreement. So officer attendance and the cost of that would be that they would have paid us already. But certainly the case officer and or myself, if it's a larger, more complex proposal, more than happy to attend and take notes and or introduce the item and chair the item if necessary. What I would say is sometimes members might be invited to kind of more public consultation events. I don't see any reason why, as a member of the public, you couldn't attend and just look at display boards and things like that. I don't think that there's a real issue with that. It's when developers are engaging specifically and only with councillors where we need to be careful.
Toby, Councillor Porter. Councillor Dryden first.
Yeah, the protocol for the site visit, is that put anywhere down so the applicants can see what our protocol is? So they know in advance, yeah, so they'll be aware of what it is, so perhaps that will stop somebody on asking us.
I think we'll have to put some thought as to where this document would go on the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning website, but I see no reason why it couldn't be in the public domain and shared with applicants.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Thank you again. This is very welcome. Picking up on Councillor Dryden's point, I think it would be really useful to have some clear guidance. So the most useful thing we get is people emailing us saying, come and visit. So it would be useful to have in section 3.5. So at the moment it says only a member of the planning committee or yourselves can organise this, whereas so what it would be useful to say, if you want to request people to come in, this is who you need to write to. So, if I get an email, I can just forward it to the case officer, or they know that. Because at the moment, I think we do it anyway. But I think that would be useful to be clear. Secondly, 3.8, when you say members are encouraged to attend organised site visits, I'd be inclined to put organised by the council, just because obviously sometimes there are organised site visits that are not organised by the council, as I think we just mentioned. And finally, 3.11, it says that the visit's only attended by members of the planning committee. I know we've had at least one site visit in the past where I think because the applicant was there to give us access to the land, the objector wanted to come too. So if that isn't possible, I think we should be clear. And because again, it's that kind of balance thing, isn't it? So I was a little unclear as to whether if one side attends, the other has the right. And equally, if a landowner declines the right, it would just be good to be a little bit clearer about that. Because I know that's where I've found it a bit difficult. I've had to refer to officers. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Did you want to come back at all on that, Toby?
I think they're all reasonable suggestions, so we'll take those into consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Got a question. So, on site visits, Toby, the sort of desire for a site visit could come from a councillor, but it could more likely come from developer, residents, or case officer, or officers more generally. Is there any difference as to how councillors should judge their need to attend to the site visit? Because we're all busy people. And for example, I know we've got one coming up in about a week's time. There's a lot of resident interest in that item. And I sort of prioritise that, thinking, especially as chair of committee, but even as a committee member, I'd be wanting to attend that if at all possible, maybe cancelling other things, make sure I'm there, sort of thing. But there might be other occasions when less so, or are they all the same, or is it up to individual councillors to make that judgment?
I think, Chair, certainly if officers are suggesting a site visit, there's usually a very strong and good reason to attend. Obviously, every case is different, but if not all members can attend, that's not the end of the the world, because those that have attended can kind of share their experience and their observations when it comes to the formal committee. It's difficult to be more kind of explicit in terms of your question, because it's really a case-by-case basis.
I realise it's a difficult question, but I thought it was good just airing that thought really as much as anything else. Councillor Collis.
Thank you, Chair. Is there a sort of notice period in terms of organising site visits? Because as Chair quite rightly observes, most of us work, or a large number of us work. So yeah, can we ask for a sort of reasonable period of notice? Thank you.
Toby, you want to address that straight away?
Yeah, I'm conscious that the last request has given members only something like 7 days. I would say, as practice, we'd want to give at least a couple of weeks' notice, and that should be possible for officers to organise. So I'll take that back and see if that might be reflected within the protocol.
Dryden?
A few years ago, we had a planning visit to another council. I can't remember where it was now, near Oxfordshire somewhere, I think it was. And what they do, on a week before they have their planning, they have a minibus, and they know they're going to have a site visit, and they go around and visit as many as they can of the applications. So everyone knows in advance that week before it's going to be a planning visit. So that's just something they do. It seems to work quite well. But although they were out in the country a bit, so it's a bit far more spread, but we're in a city, probably a bit more difficult.
Thanks, Councillor. I think you put your finger on it actually there with regard to the difference. Because I know in South Cambs they do a lot more site visits, but then they're more spread out, whereas in the city, I suppose we're expected to be able to sort of get to places ourselves. But you want to add anything to that, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that used to happen for South Cambs planning and committee, because some sites are more difficult to access or more remote. I don't think we've ever felt it necessary, the city committee, because the city is so compact, and most sites you're able to see from, a public footpath. So it's those, we're really interested in those sites where actually there's been a lot of objections and scrutiny of things like viewpoints from footpaths outside the site, but also inside the site. The case that's going to come before committee in January at Alstone Croft for the college is a case in point where members will really need to take their time to look at some of the visualisations from the boardwalk around the site. So I think the city in round the city is a different case. I don't personally feel as if there is a need to do an organised minibus tour, and it may well prove very difficult if we were to do that for some of the sites that we consider.
Okay, thanks, Toby. Any more questions? Did I miss something? Oh, Councillor Levine, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm new to this, so I'm trying to find out what the do's and the don'ts are. If I go to a site visit, actually I'm going next week to the Alstone Croft, I think you implied, did you, that if I come away and I talk to another councillor who didn't attend, that I'm allowed to debrief them and give them my views, share views completely freely, or are there any limits and rules that apply to how I would brief another member after a visit? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Toby.
I don't think there's, within a committee environment, any constraint to sharing what you've seen out on site with other members. It just helps inform a more robust decision that the committee is making.
I think I'll just tentatively add to that, perhaps, Councillor, to say that, just giving another example, when we're in the middle of an item, and we leave the room, say, a break or something, we don't discuss the item with one another, because we want to, the decision on the item is our decision, all of us together, not any individual or a group of individuals. It's all of us as a committee. So in that sense, I would say that although I think what you were getting at, whether you would sort of like feed back your what you'd observed with another councillor, but I would say bring those observations to committee and share them with all of us so we can all benefit from your observations. So, you know, take your time to sort of present what you've seen to us, and then we can all make a better and more robust decision as a committee, I would say. Councillor Dryden.
But on some training I done a few years ago, they said on legal that we shouldn't discuss anything at a formal meeting, i.e. a group meeting. So any planning you shouldn't discuss at meetings.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, this is not a political committee. We are all councillors together. Councillor Pora.
Yeah, I think like Councillor Collis, the short notice, and particularly when we do it on different days, causes me some problems because, you know, for my work I have shifts where I'm rotated on and we staff round it. So I'm not sure if I'm totally a fan of having a set day a month, but certainly for me, for example, knowing it might be one Wednesday a month would mean I could at least block my calendar. And if you could give us, say, 2 weeks' notice, what I find quite difficult is when, can you do Tuesday or Friday? And then that is really challenging. So I suppose for me, selfishly, I'd quite like it to be a sort of assumption it might be 2 weeks before committee on that Wednesday or something. A bit like we do for the development control forums where you block them in your calendar, but they probably don't happen. And also because officers presumably probably know quite early which applications will be contentious because, you know, you can see on the portal. Again, the more notice we could get, and maybe if we have to, lumping them together, just in terms of taking time off work, it's really helpful. And I do like to attend them when I can, but just sometimes if it's late notice, I can't let my colleagues down at work.
Thanks for that, Councillor. Good points. Yeah, Councillor Bajan.
I'm not sure if this was covered. A long time ago, we were Romsey councillors called together to meet with people that were developing Romsey Labour Club, and we met before the planning application went in and were involved in quite a considerable discussion with people, with the developers, about what they wanted to do and what we thought might be a good idea. Are we saying now that that would not be encouraged?
It wouldn't be encouraged, not without officers present.
And the other point is, if we're going to do a site visit, can we do it at the beginning of the day rather than part way through, so you block out a whole day?
Points to get taken on board. Some good points. If we're going to do more site visits, we need to get a bit more of a system in place, as Councillor Pora was saying. I think it'd be good to do that. And the comparison with the forums that we do is probably quite a good one, I would have thought. Just to say, this Alston Croft visit, I think there was 2 weeks' notice on that. But to be fair, there was only one option because I suggested to the officer that we just get the visit in the diary rather than asking everyone what the best day for them was, because that would have delayed everything more. And it was, so in a sense, the argument that it was a bit short notice is true because there wasn't time to sort of ask you all what your best day was and then come to a date. There was only time to make a date. So we did our best. Good points, well made. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're done on that then. Yep. Oh, sorry, Councillor Howard.
Thanks. So just to clarify, and I think it follows on from Councillor Levine's point, are we saying this extends to all members, regardless of whether they are on the committee or not?
I think this is specifically members of the planning committee, because their role must mean that they cannot be seen to prejudice themselves in any way in terms of their approach to a development, whether that be a live application or within a pre-application environment.
So members of committee, including reserves, are all decision makers potentially. So that's the difference with regard. Another councillor wouldn't be a decision maker, so not part of this committee. Councillor Dryden.
To that end, Chair, I've seen it a few times recently where a member of the planning committee stand down from being a member and then become a ward councillor, so they can speak.
Thank you. Okay, are we all done now? Okay, that's good debate. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Toby. So next item is the last one, which is item number 10, appeals overview, and that's you again, Toby, I believe.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So I'm hoping that on a monthly basis, actually, we can have a report similar to this coming to committee, so members can see, without so many appeals being listed, kind of what's come in the preceding month. But what I've tried to do here is kind of capture number of appeals that have kind of come in over the last year. We've also got quite an interesting new tool that someone in our service is developing called Power BI, which enables us to kind of pull stats out of the system and present them graphically. So we've managed to pull some stats out in terms of the city's performance on appeals, which is around 68% success rate in terms of those appeals being dismissed. There are lots of appeals listed on kind of pages 136 onwards. I just wanted to draw members' attention maybe to some of the more significant ones, or those that have come to committee. The first one's on page 136 is the Kelsey Crescent appeal. That was an overturn. We refused it and subsequently issued an enforcement notice. The inspector in that case has allowed that particular appeal. The next one I wanted to draw members' attention to is quite an interesting appeal. Some members may remember this. It's again on page 136. It's 185 to 189 Newmarket Road and 1 Godstone Road. That was an appeal where, officers were recommending approval. Members chose to refuse the application, and the inspector ultimately dismissed the appeal on conservation grounds. There's quite a lot of interesting discussion within that appeal around the conversion of the scheme. And Councillor Thornbury, you may remember we took quite a long time looking at the plans to consider whether it was a conversion or mainly a new build. The inspector in that case decided that it was a conversion, and greater flexibility needed to be afforded to internal space standards and external space standards. So that's an interesting reference point for those types of issues. There's a really interesting appeal on page 137 for, right in the middle of that page, it's 72 High Street, Cherry Hinton, where officers refused a scheme under delegated powers for lack of garden space for a number of 2-bedroom units. The inspector effectively agreed with us in that appeal that the garden spaces should be bigger, given that 2-bed units could accommodate small families. And there was also concern that we'd raised around drag distances for bins, and in this case they were well in excess of the 25-metre standard. Turning over the page, on page 138, again in the middle, land at 11 Queen Edith's Way. This was a major proposal for some serviced apartments, quite contentious within that part of Cambridge officer recommendation of approval. It was refused by committee, and the inspector allowed the appeal. There are a number of issues considered. This was an informal hearing, so it took quite a bit of officer resource to service, and the other side employed counsel and also went for costs against the council. Some of the outcomes from that appeal in particular were that there was no protection following the demolition of the care home originally. There was no protection against the use, that the users of the site would not have an over-reliance on takeaways, and that there would be no congregation issues associated with the number of service departments and that the communal facilities being provided were appropriate. Really interesting appeal decision in the context of serviced apartments and apart hotels, worth looking at if you're interested in that particular subject. Bottom of page 138, we've yet to receive this, but it would be an interesting decision, I think, in relation to 18 Adams Road. Turning onto page 139, 18 Neath Farm Court. That was a small householder that was overturned. The inspector granted permission on appeal for that. 41 Highworth Avenue. Officers have put this scheme forward for approval. It was refused by members and dismissed on appeal. Many of the grounds that we put forward on that particular appeal, including character, did not carry weight with the inspector, but what did carry weight was noise and disturbance that was potentially being generated by introducing car movements into a backland area where you're adjoining residential gardens. Not got that many more. To note on page 140, we've got still a live appeal for the Romsey Labour Club, which I think again wasn't overturned. And then on page 147, probably the most significant appeal of the year in relation to the Flying Pig. Assuming most members know about this case, it went to a formal inquiry. Some kind of outcomes in bite-sized form was that the inspector in that case considered that there was minimal harm to housing provision and heritage aspects, but recognised that there was some harm, but also recognised that there was an acute need for high quality office space within the city and that there were significant public realm improvements and substantial economic benefits and townscape benefits. Specifically in relation to the Flying Pig, the inspector had concluded that actually a reconfigured and refurbished pub would be capable of being viable. The inspector didn't, I think, took 2 paragraphs to consider the Flying Pig as an issue within the decision, which was interesting given how much concern that had been raised locally about that pub. So if you haven't read that appeal decision, I think that is an interesting one. It particularly highlights the role that economic benefits play in the consideration of these applications by members. I think that's it, Chair, but there may be appeals in here that members wanted to ask questions about. I'm not a complete fountain of knowledge in relation to all of them, but the references are there and members could look at them in their own time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Toby. It's very useful. So, always remembering this is still a public meeting, everyone. The only things I can think of are whether anyone has any questions about the item itself, having this item on committee. It's a new item. I said to Toby I thought it was a good thing to bring to the committee. The other thing is I don't think we really want further debate on any of the items that Toby has highlighted. There's not going to be a conversation about that. Toby has just highlighted those for our benefit. And finally, there might be questions on any of the other items that Toby hasn't talked about if you want any information on those. Councillor Dryden.
Just a comment again, a few years ago when it was City Council planning, was just one planning, all the committee members used to get all the appeals sent to them for information, which was quite handy to read sometimes. So I know we're getting a few now and again when it relates to an application we're interested in, but I know you don't have to read them all, but just send them and we could read what we want and get some good information, why the inspectorate, their reasons for refusing or you know, upholding appeal or whatever. So if we could do that again, I think it'd be quite handy.
Respond to that, Toby.
I see no reason why our system now, with the powers that we've got, couldn't automatically send these decisions through. So I will try and see to make that possible going forward for the new year.
So we'll check on that at a future date to see if that is possible, and hopefully it is. Right, Councillor Thornborough?
Yeah, I was going to ask if we could have this list emailed to us and whether the list, the reference numbers would be links to the appeal decisions. And my question is, there's one appeal turned away. What's an appeal that's been turned away? Thanks.
Toby?
An appeal that's turned away is usually an appeal that's invalid because it's been made off beyond the 6-month period within which someone has to make an appeal against the refusal of permission. That's usually the case with a turned away appeal. I will see what I can do in terms of links. I don't know if it's possible, but certainly these lists are mailable. Yeah.
Support.
Thank you. Definitely echo Councillor Dryden's. Having the appeal decisions emailed to us is so useful, because with the best will in the world, we're not going to go through every individual one. So it would be really useful. I think if this is coming back in a smaller format, doing what you've just done is really useful, because going through telling us why they got upheld or against us. And I think sometimes it would be really useful to almost have the plan for you to go, this is the bit they disagreed with you, or this is the part of the reasoning we didn't word in a way that they found acceptable. Because I think the couple of ones where we have had feedback, it's been quite useful to remember for future. Things like severe traffic versus traffic, you know, there's a difference. It would also be really useful to know something about the out of time ones, you know, where they go forward and we can't make a decision, because I've not really seen many of those. So it would be really good to get an idea of how much our debate is valued by the inspector, because I just don't have a feeling on that. And again, I think the cost issue is, I know it's not a material planning consideration, but certainly, obviously the Flying Pig, we didn't have costs against us, but if there are any when we're awarded costs, I think that would be particularly important to bring that back to us with the actual plans to show us what the problem was, you know, because it just helps inform future debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, I already said that I thought, not for all of them, but for some of the ones where there's a large cost implication, that we should be aware of that. And this might be a good place to do it. And I guess, you know, having Toby here so we can interrogate him on the items, as well as having them by email, is probably a good sort of protocol, really, I would have thought. Gives us more information to make decisions going forward. Any more? Councillor Dryden.
I've said it before, but going back to training in the past, we used to have a legal person in our planning training, and we was always told that you should never take any notice of what the costs might be if you, in your decisions, in a planning decision, that you shouldn't take that into consideration at all.
Toby, do you want to respond or just nod?
Chair, so I think the important thing to bear in mind is whether, if members are making coming to an alternative view on the merits of the proposal, that it is supported by the policies that we have in our local plan, or if there aren't policies, there are compelling material reasons to reach a different decision. And provided those aspects are there, then the ability for the authority to defend itself in a costs scenario is greatly increased. And we do have the adjourned decision protocol in place, and that will be flagged if we think that there is a scenario within which actually we are putting the council at significant risk of either an application for costs, and also that we don't have much chance in kind of defending a particular position. But you're quite right, Councillor, that should not be in and of itself a material consideration.
Yes, of course, Councillor.
Just that I know when this was discussed 2 years ago now, it was just that the developer was big developer, had lots and lots of money in, and then they got a legal team. And I think I think council was probably a little bit frightened at how much money they got to spend legally, and we can't actually match them. What we did is going to cost the council too much money. It was easier to let them get away with what they wanted to do.
And that one, Toby?
I don't think the council should be scared of defending its decisions. It's true that having been involved in a number of high-profile inquiries, that developers often will provide, put in much more resource than perhaps the council will within an inquiry environment, but we shouldn't be scared about kind of defending decisions that we think are reasonably and democratically made.
Just one more. I'm going back quite a few years ago now, so.
Okay, right. Any more for any more? Okay, yeah, Councillor Howard.
Again, just for my edification, but is my numbers right? Is part of the intention of item 9 not effectively to defend against such litigation? I think you mentioned that, or am I getting cross purposes in terms of challenges from outer legal bodies?
Well, we certainly live in a more litigious society, and that's a factor that we have to take into account. But I'll leave Toby to answer your substantive question.
So I think they're different points, really, because item 9, that's the committee protocol. That's around making sound decisions and protecting the council, mainly within a judicial review environment where sometimes decisions are quashed, and that has been an issue that's been raised fairly recently on an application, whereas in an appeal environment we're talking about not quashing the decision. We're talking about whether an inspector feels or considers that the council has been reasonable in terms of how it's conducted itself, and if the council's been unreasonable, and usually that's where it can't evidence reason for refusal, then we are at significant risk of an application of costs, and those costs obviously escalate the larger the project and the bigger the appeal is, because there's more resource put into fighting against those reasons for refusal by.
Thank you, Toby. Is that okay, Councillor Howard?
I was going to ask for a separate clarification on why we're not voting on item 9.
Item 9. I think because it's a note only, but recommendation. So the recommendations are: 1, note this report and the accompanying planning committee protocol for officer site visits. 2, confirms implementation of the protocol for officer-led site visits for the Cambridge City Council Planning Committee. So, I mean, we could vote on at least on item 2, I suppose, of that bit 2 of item 2.1. Would members like to vote? We can if we like. Why not? And it's meant to be to note, I think, but it doesn't clearly say note in part 2. Officers, do you want to advise?
I think it might be helpful if members wanted to support the recommendation at 2.12, subject to the revisions as discussed, and the protocol can be settled in due course once it's made its way also through the South Cambs committee and the JDCC.
You have a vote? Yep. All those in favour of the recommendations? Against?
Chair.
Against? Abstain?
1 abstention.
Okay, thank you for that. So in that case, I think we're all done. Any more? Okay, thanks very much, everyone. We finished a bit early. So have a nice rest of the day. Cheers.